so great to be here. Thank you all for being here with us. This is going to be so fun. First of all, thank you to the outside team. Thank you to Robin, Sharon, Laura, CJ, John. Oh my gosh, you guys are amazing. Having been behind the scenes a little bit of what this took to pull off today. A huge thank you, a huge thanks to all the sponsors. But yeah, we get to bring it home. I am really, really lucky to be up here with some of my favorite people. In some cases, we've worked together for maybe almost 20 years. And all of us have a common thread around being women, if you didn't know, and being women in spaces where we have not always been the majority. And so we're gonna have a really honest conversation about what that's been like, hopefully some advice for all of you in the room, because all of you are here because you care about this. So men, women, non-gender conforming folks, however you identify, like thank you for being here. Hey, Dan. And thank you for being part of the conversation. In kicking this conversation off, it was actually quite difficult because outside of the titles that you see on the screen behind me, these women are multi-hyphenates in every sense of the word. So beyond the amazing titles and accolades you may know about these women already, we've got a former litigator up here. Yeah, watch out. We've got a couple founders and entrepreneurs, an Emmy Award winner, athletes, entrepreneurs, as I said, and some brain injury, actually survivors, which we'll talk about a little bit as well as it relates to our athletic backgrounds. But I'm actually going to start with Rebecca. Rebecca Rusch, I hope needs no introduction. 7-time world champion, as a mountain biker, someone I've admired my whole career. But she's also a founder, an entrepreneur. She's also about to embark on this really exciting next chapter of her life, exploring her experience with her own brain injury. And so we thought it would be cool for her to kick off a little bit and talk about her experiences as a multi-hyphenate, which can be quite intimidating. So for those of you who are early in your careers and who are learning maybe more about all of these women, it can feel a little inaccessible, right? Like, God, these women are ballsy and they have lots of awards, and I don't feel like I could be one of them, and actually you can. But I wanted to talk about the choices you've made to tackle all the things you've tackled, some of the sacrifices, and whether you felt like that has sort of defined your purpose in life.
All right, that's a big question. Thank you, Mel.
All those things.
Yeah. I'm a multi-hyphenate. I hadn't heard that until you brought it up. So first I will say for folks who are wanting to be in the outdoor industry, expand in the outdoor industry, be an entrepreneur, whatever it is, none of us have it figured out. None of us have had a linear path to where we've gotten. And the common thread, when I think about everything that I've done in my life, the common thread has always been exploration and being outside. And my very first memory as a kid is swinging on the tire swing outside in the backyard and like pulling apart little milk pods in the yard and looking at caterpillars and like moving and playing and being curious in outdoors. That's my first childhood memory. And I still feel the same way. I want to go exploring, I want to look, I want to check it out, I'm curious. And that really has been the common thread motivation for everything that I've done, being outside and moving and looking around. And so, you know, Mel was like, how do you have so much energy for all the stuff that you do? It comes from that one motivation of what energizes me is nature and being outside and exploring, and the people who also love being in nature and exploring outside. And those things are kind of what I built my career on. And when I think about my early sport, like playing in the backyard as a little kid, riding a little bike around the neighborhood, it's still that sense of community and wonder that I still feel at 55 now of like, oh, what could I do with these amazing people? And it shifted a little from being a kid in the backyard or high school cross-country running was where I first found sport. And what I found there that I didn't as a little kid is I found community and confidence. As a young girl, cross-country running on trails, I found that my body could be strong and that there were other people running around in the woods who were having fun doing that. And so trying to build a career out of that was because I had to. I knew that going into a cubicle or an office or a more traditional space would not have been inspiring for me. It would not have been motivating for me. It would not have pulled out the best of me. That said, the path, there was no path, you know, in the 90s of like, oh, graduating from college and I had a business degree and I started working in health clubs because that is what was available in the sports industry at the time. But there was an indoor climbing wall in Chicago, one of the first ones in the 90s, and I learned to rock climb inside and was like, oh. And that's where I moved outdoors and formed a business and started running rock climbing gyms and just figuring out a way to make it happen. And so when people ask, well, how did you forge your path in business, and then became a professional athlete and then did films, and you know, now we're doing a lot of work to get more women and more people into the outdoor industry. It wasn't a linear path at all, and it was more just followed by passion and figuring it out as we went along. And now I run a few businesses, you know, I run an event, but it was really that kid who just wants to play. And so when I struggle now in business, because I'm like, I didn't ever plan this, I go back to like, what do I learn on the trail? What was the initial motivation to explore, to get teammates? Like even the way this panel came together, I'm like, I want to get a bunch of really cool women together and hang out, and this feels like play to me because it's so amazing and supportive. And so I use my lessons in nature and the trail all the time to be like, okay, I don't know where I'm going. Let's look at a map. Okay, there's no map. Let's get a machete. Let's just like figure it out. And so I really use my experience in the outdoors to help guide me in business and collaboration and evolution and creativity. And I feel real lucky to have been able to push my way into a space where there wasn't a path to follow, but I feel really passionate that to forge more trails. So maybe not everyone needs a machete anymore, and that we can have teammates and just kind of bring people along to play on the trail and be in the outdoors, because the place where I learn everything, where I'm the most physically healthy, mentally healthy, community-based, is surrounded by the outdoor space. And I feel like it's critical. It's critical for me, and it's critical for our world that more people are in the outdoor space, working in the outdoor space, and the participation is there with women. We're 47% or something of outdoor recreation, but we're not yet in leadership at that percentage. And so that is was the motivation for all of this, is to get us together, get a bunch of teammates together, and let's roll out the map and try to figure it out.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we're excited to be with you all today was kind of digging into the stats of why everyone should want women, people of color, different people in leadership roles. And I think because you all are here, you sort of get that intrinsically. Maybe from a values perspective, you really embrace diversity as part of who you are. But even if you don't, you should want diverse leadership in your organizations. And as an investor, I think I've had to really learn how to embrace the data behind the why of diversity. That if you have more women and diverse people leading your organizations, you deliver better returns. Well, as an investor, that really speaks to me. Yes, I want diverse faces and people in our organizations, and I actually want to deliver faster returns. Diverse-led organizations also drive more innovation. So if you care about working at an innovative company, team, you should also want diverse leaders in your organization. And then I think during COVID, we also learned an interesting insight around culture. And so the companies that retained their employees well, which was hard, right? During COVID, were more likely to be diverse-run organizations. So women tend to create cultures on their teams where people feel seen and feel a little more safe and are able to thrive during an existential crisis like COVID. So the data around the why of women being in leadership roles in the outdoors in particular is really there. And I think each of you sort of have a unique perspective on how you've represented a data point around a pivot maybe in your careers. And so I'm going to use your example, Juliet Starrett, who I will forever call J-Star, so you should too. Because I've known her and her husband Kelly as long as I've been in the active and outdoor industry. However, I did not know that she was an attorney for 8 years, and when I learned that, it all made sense. Before that, she was a world champion whitewater athlete. That made sense too. But I know you as this health and fitness icon. You've written a book, you run a successful podcast. So what was that like for you, that massive career change?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying, first of all, thank you all for being here. And I actually started my professional career in life as a river rafting guide. And if you could look back at my 18-year-old brain, I was a freshman in college at UC Berkeley, and I thought to myself, what job can I do where I can be tan, be outside, and hang out with attractive men? That was literally my entire thought process at 18 years old. Well, somehow I landed on river guiding. I went to guide school the spring break of my freshman year of college, and I ended up working as a river guide for almost 10 years. So, I graduated from UC Berkeley, packed up my 2000 and very janky, it wasn't even 2000, I'm sorry, 1986 Subaru, and went directly from my graduation to go continue working rivers all over California. And since that time, my husband and I have been entrepreneurs running companies, and one of the questions people often ask me is, hey, is it helpful to you as an entrepreneur that you're a lawyer? And I say, well, sort of. It's sort of helpful to me. There's ways in which I can not hire lawyers, and I get invited to tables sometimes because I can say lawyer. But what was actually more helpful to me and continues to be more helpful and influential to me was working as a guide. I think that experience is the greatest single leadership school anybody can ever attend. It might be too late for all of you in this audience, but if any of you have kids, try to get them to be a guide. Because, at 18 years old, I was taking people down class 4 and class 5 rivers. I was responsible for their safety. I had to plan logistics. I had to manage people. I had to buy all the food. We had to make sure we didn't lose the food going down the river. We had to drive the vehicles. I had a commercial driver's license. I drove school buses. We were doing it all, and it was really a figure it out culture, which in the end is what has been the most helpful for me being an entrepreneur, was just being like, I have no idea how to do this, but we're gonna figure it out. So somewhere in there, I decided to be a lawyer, and I actually liked being a lawyer, and I was good at it. And I was making a lot of money, and it's not great nobody appreciates saying it's nice to make money, but it's kind of fun to make money, especially because when I was working as a river guide, I was making $55 a day, and working 12-hour days.
Plus tips.
Plus tips. So it was fun after that to make money, and I was good at it, and I liked being a lawyer, and I worked with a lot of really smart people. I was working at a big law firm. I was on my way to being partner, but like a lot of women, I didn't see a single person ahead of me that I wanted to be like. There was a cadre of women ahead of me who'd made partner, and these women were the true glass ceiling breakers. They were the first women in the late 80s and 90s to become partners at these big law firms, but they had to make more sacrifices than I was willing to make in my own career. So as I looked at them, I thought, man, there's not a single person in this law firm whose life I want. They're really good at being lawyers, but I don't want their life. And I had a little taste of what it was like to have a different life working as a river guide. And I think the other thing about being a river guide is I got really comfortable taking risks. Nobody's really good at being a river guide because you show up at the shore and you may sort of know the river, but yesterday the water level was 2,000 CFS higher, and now it's 2,000 CFS lower. And then you get a bunch on one day. I had a group of construction guys that are like, hey, do you mind if we call you Queenie? And I'm like, no problem. And then the next day I have a group of CEOs who want to talk to me about investing and what I think about that. And so you're really putting your life in the hands of these people that are paddling your boat down the river. You've got to get really comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think it was that feeling that allowed me to say, hey, I may be making a lot of money, and I'm doing well, and I'm about to become partner, but guess what? I'm going to leave this fancy job behind, and I'm going to go run a gym that is in a parking lot in the Presidio in San Francisco, where we stored all of our equipment in a shipping container. Nobody could really relate to that. People thought I was kind of crazy, but what I'll say, and I'll leave you with this, is in river guide terms, we think of units of distance as a sea. So a sea is as far as you can see down the river to where the river turns and makes a bend and you can no longer see it. So what river guides say to each other is like, where's the lunch spot? And you say, it's about 4 C's from here. Obviously, it's just an estimate. But that's a unit of language that we use in river guiding terms. So what I love about this sea idea is that on a river, you don't know what's coming after the next sea. You have to be okay knowing that whatever's around that bend is something that you don't know what it is. And for me, that's what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is about figuring it out, not knowing what's around the corner, being willing to take risk. And I think that's what has driven my ability to make all of these pivots in my life. Did I answer the question at all?
Oh my God, yes.
I kind of blacked out.
Yes, beforehand, Juliet's like, I'm really not prepared and I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. And then, lo and behold, Jesus. All right. So one of the things that I think we also all have in common is that we have dealt with this sort of archetype of what it means to be a successful woman, which is always the label we get, despite us having many identities as people up here. But when you are a successful woman, you sort of feel like you have to do it all and be perfect and be articulate and extroverted and also be a great mom, by the way, and also be a great partner and also probably do some philanthropic shit and God, do all the things. It's exhausting. And Susan, before I knew you, when I knew you only as a senior vice president at REI, I thought you were that woman. I mean, you seemed to have it all figured out, and you were so polished and so smart and so loved by your team. And we got connected because Susan at REI also set up the Path Ahead venture program. And so as new venture people, we were like, okay, we'll figure this out together. And then I got to know that in fact, your journey has been a winding journey as well. I mean, you started very entry level at REI, worked probably elbows out sometimes to get to the place where you are today. But I think it'd be great to hear a little bit of that story.
Thank you, appreciate the time. It's funny, she said the word perfection, and once in a while I would have people that were like, hey, will you mentor me? Or, gosh, Susan, how do you do it all? And you kind of sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, does somebody think I have it all together? And they don't know what's in the mind, right? But I actually reflected about that, and one thing you have to put aside is perfection. You just need to say, and I've never been a perfectionist anyways, but you have to say I'm gonna lean into my strengths, and I'm gonna have a few non-negotiables so that it can steer me. It can be my 4 C's, which way am I going? And I learned that through some bumps, definitely. I remember I had just been promoted to be a vice president at REI, which I was super excited about. And it was January 2014. I had gone to OR, I had gone to SIA. I had a leadership retreat. I had 2 boards, nonprofit boards I was serving on. I had a fundraiser, and my husband, we have a family calendar, and we have the old school, open it up family calendar, right? And he's like, honey, I am your rock. I will do everything to support you, but you're only home 6 nights this whole month. And I was like, oh my gosh, and you realize I love doing all of those things, but the family was gonna be the short side of the stick, my husband, my kids. And so I actually had to make a choice then. And I had 2 nonprofits, and it was a great time to say, you know what, you need to know what you can do. And so we instituted a rule that I could only be on 1 nonprofit at a time. And so I stepped away from a social services group I was with. And at that same time, I had the benefit of working with a leadership coach. And that month, she's like, so what worries you? You just started in this new job, you're 4 weeks into it. And I'm like, I've already seen, I'm excited about my job, but I also don't want my family to suffer, or my health, my mental well-being. And so she was great about saying, well, what really matters for you and your family? And I'm like, we love travel. When we travel, we're totally connected, phones off, doing new things. And so she actually helped me make a plan that I would set aside at the beginning of the year. I would block out at each quarter a trip, a family trip, and stay to that. And that really, I still do that now. I love traveling with the family. And so finding those things that ground you So fast forward to fall 2020, as all of us in this room, we were navigating the pandemic. I was senior vice president in merchandising and having to deal with cancellations, figuring out how we stay in business. It was super energizing in some ways because it was like new problems to solve. And at the same time, my daughter was in the hospital with a life-threatening illness. And, I was trying to do it both. And I just remember going like, okay, what did they tell you? Right, on your deathbed, is someone gonna say, I'm so glad you helped us get those receipts and get us through the fall of 2020, but not be with your kid who's in the hospital, right? And so I worked for REI, great company, Eric Arts, was so supportive. He's like, step back. And so took a step back, took 4 months off, and I remember my daughter was out in North Carolina for treatment. I was out there having dinner with her, and she's like, oh, so when do you fly back to Seattle, get back to work? And I'm like, I'm not going back to work till you can fly back to Seattle. I'm here for the time. And she was like, are you kidding me? And because she knows, I love work too, and I think she realized, we're gonna be there for you. So I say that because taking a break actually can be totally re-energizing. Now, it's not the reason I would have wanted to take a break, but kind of dig in and find a little bit more about yourself. And when I came back, I had this really unique opportunity to do some thinking for REI about racial equity. And Eric had asked, just go help us figure out what we should do here. And so I had the best 3 months ever. I want to say what you were saying, I did have a oh shit, I wasn't, sorry. I thought you were gonna do that first now. But I had this I gotta figure out racial equity and I gotta figure out the venture fund, and I was really anxious, why did I sign up for this? And what I found is lean into your strengths. And one of my strengths was networking and using the people who care about REI, about racial equity, about connecting with me, and leaning in and learning from them and developing a business strategy and a direction with people who have been there, whether it was investors, founders, people who are in inclusion networks, just using that entire resource. So I had 150 interviews in 3 months, and I felt so blessed. One, it actually opened up a whole new part of how I think about business, and I would have never got to do that had I not taken a step back, re-ground myself, and then lean into the new thing. And that's how, Deanne said, you gotta meet Mel, and I have a call with Mel, and Mel is here's 6 other people for you, and this is these resources, and so it's just the power of your network and paying that back as people look to you to help them connect with others.
Thank you, Deanne.
Thank you. Who's also the ultimate networker.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the story about your daughter too. I wasn't sure if you were comfortable going there or not, and I'm really glad you did, because we all, I think, have also experienced our own personal grief and loss and trauma, and we're human beings, right? And all of you have probably had those experiences as well, and I think sometimes it feels more or less safe for us as women to talk about not feeling it, to having more serious mental health or psychological issues that are preventing you from showing up the way you expect yourself, or maybe other people expect you to show up as. And so that loss and grief and some of the realities of living this human life also have tied us together in our stories. And so Jess, one, it's so wonderful to be on stage with you. It's such an honor to be here with you. I had the privilege of sponsoring Jess for about 5 minutes when Nike had a snowboarding program. Yes, Nike had a snowboarding division, because we really knew how to screw up a good thing. And so it's so killer to be up here with you. So I know a lot about your story, and there are so many adjectives and pronouns that are used to describe you, and they're all very empowering. You're such a role model for so many women and people in and outside of snowboarding. Your style, if you have not seen her on a snowboard, please, after this, go on YouTube. It's crazy. Always progressive, always pushing the boundaries, And she's doing that off the snowboard too now with The Uninvited, which is first a film and then an event series that's all dedicated to bringing women into the snowboarding community. And a lot of the strength that I know of you now in this chapter of your career, I think comes from deep loss and grief. And thank you for talking about that as openly as you have, because I think it's really important that we show up that way. And so can you share a little bit of what it was like for you to go through that with your snowboarding community? Were they part of your healing? And how has that experience made you the person that you are now, building The Uninvited?
Thank you. To be honest, the snowboarding community didn't, at that point, was not welcoming to the girls, and it sure didn't want to hear about your feelings or see anything, give you any space for anything. And I think experiencing that loss kind of like broke me open so badly that I really started to question why are we here? What does it even matter? What does another video part matter? What does another award matter? What really matters, and what do you leave when you're gone? And I think that's what pushed me to create something, and also just the lack of a community. I mean, you say snowboard community, and no offense, but like the guys would just shit on us all the time, and I wanted allies. I wanted my own community, so I made one, and I just took a bunch of girls that I knew had the talent and used my own resources to help them get somewhere, and it just built from there. So I think it just came from kind of being like lonely, and also looking back at my journey and how, I mean, everyone's journey is hard, but it was crazy that there's a lot, and I'm sure you all know, that we had to put up with, that we weren't allowed to talk about. But yeah, just knowing, like, it was a way to go back and heal myself, I think, by giving everything that I had to others.
We talked a little bit about the journey of athletes and how our industry, the outdoor industry, isn't really set up to welcome professional athletes onto this side, onto the business side. So there are a lot of athletes who really struggle with what to do, especially women, after their professional careers are over. Because most likely they have not been paid enough where they have a lot of choices after they're not competing in contests and doing their thing at a professional level. And so I think it would be really important for us as industry leaders to really think about how to make sure that that experience is really smooth, and there are ways for you to take the experience you had on the bike and on the snowboard and on the whitewater raft and turn that into business acumen. Because having spent most of my career around professional athletes, like you know how to do all that. You have an MBA of you as a brand and how to tell a great story, how to generate content. Like, I love that you just picked up the camera yourself and started filming. Like, I don't know if you had mentors helping you do that or if you just kind of figured it out. But
I had YouTube.
Perfect.
I feel like it's all the same. Basically, you're looking at a space that you know nothing about actually succeeding in, but you just have such passion for it and drive, and it's just about figuring it out yourself. And like you were saying about how much more guiding helped you in the business world, like it's all about, for me, it's not, snowboarding is just the thing I ended up doing, but it was all about making something that people thought was impossible possible. But I could sure use some more finesse and polish on the business side of things, and that is something, yeah, that's been tough to try to figure out and just almost fake my way through it, meetings and funding and everything. Like, you know, to be honest, I don't really know much, but for everyone out there that also thinks they don't know anything, like, just do it, pretend you can do it. Sorry to admit that I didn't know how to do it.
Sitting next to her brand sponsor.
Yeah, like when I got asked to do this panel, I was like, yeah, cool. And then I looked at all the other panelists and was like, oh my God.
No, we looked at you.
But I was like, what am I doing there? What am I gonna say? Like, should I look up a vocabulary list before this meeting. Seriously, and I, to be honest, and I feel bad saying this, I had this kind of preconceived notion of all of you, business women, CEOs, investor, capitalist, angel, whatever. And
I don't know what it means either.
and I was like, wow, they're so fancy. But when I actually read your stories, like all of you built yourself up from nothing and built yourself up and took so many massive turns, and you're not just born a CEO, you know, you're a teacher and a journalist or a lawyer or, you know, so I think it was a really big wake-up call for me, just this panel being like, whoa, they're actually all like me, just further. So for everyone else out there that thinks you're just some dirtbag, you could end up here. I spilled water on my shirt the first sip I took.
We're all a mess.
Yeah, okay.
We're all dirtbags.
You never stop feeling like a dirtbag, right? No, never.
Yeah, dirtbag climber, dirtbag raft guide, dirtbag mountain biker. Dirtbag's is a good thing. It's a sort of accolade.
We're actually trying to get back to being dirtbags.
Yeah, exactly. I want to make a quick comment about female athletes, female entrepreneurs. I was a Red Bull athlete for 22 years, and my athlete manager, Aaron Lutzi, who was a great mentor, he shared with me at one point he had 18 athletes that he was managing, half of them women, which was a lot. It was a great ratio. All of the women were world champions, and had a foundation, and had this, and had that, and did girls groups, and did camps for people, and. The guys, great athletes. One of them was a world champion athlete. They were athletes, they were professional athletes, but the women were also running businesses and doing things and at a higher level, competing at a higher level. And it's just the state of the universe is that women had to do more to get the same opportunity. You had to have all those things, create businesses, create events, do all these things, figure it out yourself. And it's changing, but just to let you know, if you're hiring, hire a female athlete because she's already been an entrepreneur because she had to, not because she wanted to. She was underpaid and she had to forge her way, and she had to, me too as well, I say she, I mean me, had to figure it out and create other businesses because you're frankly just not getting paid enough to do the job that you're expected to win a world championship and do all the other things really well. So great job, but that's just the state of female athletes, is that we are multitaskers, and no offense to the male athletes, but it's hard to ask somebody to do a job at a professional level, but ask them to do 5 other jobs at the same time.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Thank you. Yeah, and you can clap anytime. Go for it. I want to make sure we have time to talk about the uninvited a little bit more, which, by the way, we appropriated the name of Jess's event, and we now have a crew, like kind of a gang, and we're called the uninvited. We're getting tattoos later. T-shirts.
And on the back, we can write Queenie or J-Star. You actually get to pick.
Perfect. I've known Sophie for, I think, almost 20 years. So we kind of have our battle wounds from our Nike days.
We're old. That's basically what she just said, yes.
Yes, and I know enough about you now at the North Face, the CMO there, to know that you are still doing the work we tried to do at Nike, which was often, it felt like hijacking the company to try to do good. You know, when sometimes there was a real objective around growth. I mean, at one point our CEO
Here, I wish I was a dirtbag, first of all, like, and also to, I've again known Mel for a long time, but if you had told me 20 years ago that Mel would ever say this about me, or that I would be in a room and she would be the MC, was, you know, I've always looked up to her, so it's a privilege to be here. It's not easy. I actually think you said something very important earlier, which was you have, you know, if you have a more diverse leadership, you actually bring the growth in, bring the revenue in, you're a more successful company. And ultimately, the fact is most people in an organization are only looking at the number. They're not really looking at the how. And I'm generalizing, of course, that's not true for everybody. But what you traditionally have to do is actually build that context. You actually have to explain why doing good, and that can be doing good in many ways. That can be the diversity conversation. That can be the sustainability conversation. That can be so many of those things that, we talk a lot about conservation at the North Face. We talk a lot about things that really matter. You actually have to put into a context so people understand how it actually will impact the bottom line. If there's no tie back to the bottom line, it's very difficult. So there's that. First, you have to create the context. And then the reality is also, what I find actually very often, the bigger challenge is actually, I work with very, very passionate people. Whether it was at Nike or the North Face, or even before I worked at Everlane, nothing to do with the outdoor industry, but a sustainability based company. And I work with very, very passionate people who believe the brand should not be in the business of making money, it should be in the business of giving back the money. But there's that same thing, we have the same disconnect of there's no money to give back if you don't make money. And so the revenue or revenue growth is so, for me, important and fundamental. You actually have to, when you have a brand of a certain size, when you're a mission-driven company, you actually have to be profitable to be able to do more good, right? And that's one thing I think I learned over the years, and I think the Nike example is a good example. It doesn't matter almost at Nike how, for me, sorry, I should say, how the role that I got, in the end, I still felt like I had no power. And that was one of the bigger roles and in marketing at the time, and I felt like I had no power. I had no power to decide, no power to direct. And that's just because it's a very big organization. What I love at the North Face is a mission-driven company. I do have the power to be able to inform and influence. But I think over the years what I've realized is I don't need a brand or a company to make an impact. I do think as a person, individually we all have power. It's really about what do you do with it. And it's not just if you have the most amount of money, you have more power, or if you have the title, you have more power. We all have power because we have a voice. We all have a voice. It's just a question of what do we do with that voice, and how do we act, and how do we live every day. And so for me, that has been the biggest unlock. It's like, how do we, yes, of course, I want us as a brand to do all of those things, and it's very important, and I'm going to keep on driving the revenue so that we can actually do more good, right? But what am I doing? And more importantly, what is the community that I'm building and the network that I'm building so that I can actually have an impact? Because there's a lot you can do by yourself. You can do a lot more if you're bringing people along. And so it's finding that power and finding the opportunity. And then, now I can apply it into my work. But it is, again, every brand, every mission-driven or purpose-driven brand is going to have that issue of reconciling, doing the right thing, doing good things, and making money. Because sometimes, it's hard. I mean, again, I'm going to go sustainability. Creating a sustainable garment, you're not going to get the same margin. Margin is what's going to make or break your growth, right? And so sometimes you have to take a step back in order to grow, in order to do more. And that's really hard to communicate. Now, in my marketing shoes now, communicating those changes, communicating the fact that you have to do that, mostly nowadays where consumers just can turn on you in like a heartbeat, really difficult, really difficult. So all that to say, I have not figured it out now. Thank you for acting like I know what I'm doing. I haven't figured it out, but I think in talking to people, in connecting with working at a great brand, having great teammates, that's how you get there. But it's incremental. It's incremental progress.
I love that you're there. I mean, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what culture meant at Nike. We had maxims, we had posters and stuff, and cafeterias and bathrooms, and we actually walked the walk. We tried to, those values. But at the end of the day, I think we learned, and I wonder if this resonates for all of you and whatever organizations you're in, that culture is just sort of an embodiment of the people who are leading your company. Like, you gotta look at the top, and you gotta decide whether you feel like that person or group really represents the culture that aligns with your own, expectations and values. I think it's also really interesting and important to think about the people those companies hire and fire. Because when you ask the best CEOs in the world, I tried to spend as much time learning from those people as possible as an investor. Investing in wonderful CEOs. I want to learn how I can help new first-time CEOs be the best leaders of their companies possible. And it is so much about the people. And I think as women, because we are naturally often put into the bucket of being strong people, we're connectors, we're a little more emotional, we're the nurturers. Some of that is very primal, right? Just we as evolutionarily, I think, are the nurturers in our culture. I think that somehow that power of understanding and connection and leadership and caring about people is seen as a soft attribute. There's the hard skills. There's knowing how to do, in my world, in venture capital, for example, knowing how to assess businesses and do market and competitive analyses, which, by the way, I also know how to do. But don't worry, Robin. But I also spend more time with the people, because you can invest in a great company, but if the founder and his team is just not there, if the reason why they're at that company is not aligned, everything falls apart. And so for the women in the room who have struggled with that, disassociating from maybe what might be your identity, which is I kind of love people and teams, and I want to use that as a superpower, but I don't know if that's valued in the business world. Just know that it is. As an investor, I care all day about whether CEOs are tuned into that. And sometimes we don't invest in great companies because we don't feel that connection from the leadership team. So you've always shown up that way, and so that you are killing it and you are figuring it out.
So you're saying I should start a business and you'll invest in it?
Yes! Was this the trick? Is that the whole point of me saying yes? Okay. So we wanted this to be actionable in the time we have left. In terms of feedback for anyone who is okay, cool, this was fun, but what do I do next? Or how do I take this into work that can happen after this panel? And so I'd love for each of you to talk about one thing that the audience can do to directly impact diversity in the outdoor industry, supporting other women, or just sort of representing a different style of leadership. And I guess I'll put the caveat there that I have often felt like women have not signed up for the big jobs for a variety of reasons. Some of that is the architecture of the system we live in, and some of that is we might not feel like we're ready. We did an interesting body of work at Nike trying to figure out the pay equity gap and all sorts of issues. And one of the things that was really interesting coming out of that research was that the men that we worked with were promoted in the company twice as fast as the women. It's a really interesting learning, right? And measurable, because at the end of the day, you want data around diversity. You want to be able to measure progress, and you can't do that if you don't know where you are today. And one of the reasons why, when this agency presented their work back, was we tended to promote men based on potential, but women based on performance. That was such an unlock. And a lot of the women of our peer group were like, yeah, I feel that. That's really hard, and we started to do work around why that bias was there. And so in the ways that we can provide some learnings of our own that this room can take back, whether it's for you individually, for all the awesome men in this room, things that you can do, can you each share a little bit about what you would love for the audience to do next?
Yeah, I come from a competitive background, competitive racing, and if you're not first, you're last is kind of often my job, but I do really like to encourage to lift while we climb, and everyone can win. It isn't a, one person finishes first kind of a thing, and so we can still achieve our goals while bringing others up with us and seeing potential in someone else. And being like, come here, let's do this panel together. Something as simple as this. And often, to Mel's point, we don't see in ourselves what other people see in us. And so look around at your coworkers, the people that are there, and just provide an invitation for somebody to be like, hey, do you want to come to the Outside Summit? I've got a comp ticket. you should come with me. So a simple invitation goes a really long way for somebody who maybe doesn't have the confidence or thinks they don't have the experience, or, oh, I don't belong in that space. A very simple invitation, a hand to lift while you're climbing too, and it's collaboration, not competition. We're all actually in this outdoor space together, and if we sort of climb the mountain together, it's way more fun on the summit with a whole group of people up there to high five instead of being the only one up there being like, I was first. That isn't what it's about. So that would be sort of my invitation to you, is to invite some other people in your trajectory upward.
I'll tell a little story before I give my advice. Let's go. So my piece of advice would be do your homework, and I'll tell a story behind that. So my husband and I started our first business together in 2005, and we have since started another business. We've been business partners together since the very beginning, like from the very moment we were like, let's start a business. And although he is the face of our business in many ways, he's sort of the famous guy that people know, we've been partners since the very beginning. But a lot of people think that I'm his secretary to this day. And I was just on a panel a couple months ago, and this literally happened. I was introduced, and when someone was saying my bio, they said, you know, Juliet left her law career to help Kelly run his businesses. And then I was there on stage, and like, okay, all right. You know, I couldn't say anything because I'm on a panel. But I would say do your homework, understand who people are, understand what their background is, and make sure you know who's doing what in organizations, because oftentimes the person who's up front and the person that you see isn't the one always doing everything. And so I would just say be mindful of that. Be mindful of that.
I would start mine with a little story too. I think many of you in this room, either you're a leader who's responsible for talent in you work side by side with great talent. I remember my oldest daughter was 9 months old, and at REI, especially back then, we didn't have much turnover, and this director job of action sports came up. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have a 9-month-old, like, I don't know if I should go for it or not. And my boss at the time, she was like, Susan, this job comes open once every 10 years. You're applying for this. And like, that was like, it was just so encouraging. And I was like, yes, but you know, I've got a young kid. And she's like, your 90% is somebody else's 110. Like, you know, she just kept encouraging. And so I say that, one, because you could be that person that's encouraging. But the other thing I really caution is sometimes we project our assumptions on somebody else's life stage and where they are. And so you might have somebody in your team that just had a child, and you think, oh, I don't want to give them extra scope because I want to be protective of their time, or I don't want to encourage them to go for this promotion because I want to be protective. Let them make the decision, right? Like, give them that opportunity. And the same goes to when someone's later in their career. You know, the worst thing you ever want to hear is someone say, oh, I don't think she would want that promotion because I think like she's probably a couple years out from retirement. They're like, wait, let the team member say what's the best thing for them. So think about that, whether you're in a talent review or you're considering opportunities for staff, lean into them and let them make that call.
I think two things. First, if you're looking to add diverse talent to your team, or you're looking to create more diversity and you hire that diversity or add them, you're going to get a diverse opinion. And I think to caution yourself and prepare yourself to not have this knee-jerk reaction when you hear someone's perspective that you're not used to hearing, that's not your own. It's not just the face and the skin color and the how someone identifies that makes your company diverse and checking those boxes. It's also like, and I'm not saying that just because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but it's also what's going to make you more money, because you're going to be able to reach all these other customers that have a different perspective. And then the other thing I would say is to embrace your competition. something that really changed my life. Like I was, again, a competitive athlete in a space that had very few spots for girls, and then the Nike snowboarding program ended, and I was like, uh-oh, now I have to get but instead of, I really challenged myself to not be afraid of bringing someone up that could take my job, and I think it takes a lot of balls, and it's gonna feel uncomfortable, but if you connect with people that could take your job and you help those people, they might take your job, but then they will help you after. You'll have an ally and instead of a competitor, and I think that it's really, really courageous thing to do, and it feels good after you're done being uncomfortable, so yeah.
That was really good. I think my first one, I was trying to find a way to say it in not like a negative way, but be annoying. Like, be persistent, but a little bit more than persistent. Be almost annoying, but without being annoying. Right? I'm really good with words. But it's. I actually think that it's important. It's. My team is here, and they know that's like, well, I'll be in creative review, and there's not a day that goes by where I'm like, we have, like, show me where's the diverse talent, like, we need diverse photographers, like there's all of it for me is, and it's not just the talent, it's the whole package, right? Have we thought about it? There's not a day that goes by, and they are thinking about it as well, but I believe my duty is to say it. And I'm using this as an example because it's a practical daily example, but it's like, just say it. If you see it, say it. If you see something, say something, right? It's just, there's something to it. And I know it can be annoying, but trust that there's people that don't think about it at all. And so you actually have to be that voice in the room. And then the other one, I will say, I'm gonna do two as well. The other one I would say is pay it forward. I think it's really important. I think, actually, a friend of mine, actually, a lot of my mentors in my life have been men, actually. And they took it upon themselves to push women for roles and for opportunities, or for networking opportunities and things like that. And for instance, somebody gave me this advice, and I try to do it as much as I can. Like on LinkedIn, people reach out all the time asking for time or recommend, like, I'd like to know what you think of this, or they just want to pick my brain. And someone was saying, hey, but who do you respond to first? Like, you don't have a lot of time, who do you give your time to? And I hadn't really thought about it. Somebody said that to me almost 5-6 years ago. And now I'm much more purposeful in who I actually get back to. Because that's my way of paying it forward. It doesn't mean I don't care about everybody, I don't have time for everybody, so therefore I have to think about, okay, who can I help and how do I pay it forward? So pay it forward in whichever way you can. I think the Invited does that. I think there's so many opportunities for us to all pay it forward, so pay it forward.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we are on time. Can you guys thank this awesome panel? To meet any of you
in high school and college. And so there's a lot of learning that happens by being outside and moving together, whether it's at a young age or at any age, at any stage in life. A lot of our problems are solved out on the trail. So your story kind of made me think about that.